Thank you for listening to Sharp HR Career Corner. This is a special episode. Normally, we cover professionals in all types of careers and learn about where they started, what they're doing now, and how they got to where they are now. But these are not normal times. We're living in the COVID-19 crisis. What that means for us living in New York State and for many states around us is mandatory stay-at-home mandates by the governor. Our children are now learning online, and all work for adults is remote unless you are deemed an essential worker. We're going out to grocery stores or the pharmacy is our luxury, but now wearing a mask over our nose and mouth and staying at least 6 feet away from anyone in public is our new norm. I don't think most of us ever thought that we would ever be living through this in our lifetime, but we are. And as my grandmother used to say, we're never given more than what we can handle. We're learning as a community that we indeed can get through this, and we will. But unfortunately, people are still getting sick. The good news takeaway from our daily briefing from the governor today, April 5th, 2020, was about 74% of people in the hospital have been discharged. But the reality is that people with autoimmune issues and the elderly are the most compromised. That is why we are being told from the federal, state, local, county, and city level of governments that we must all stay home to help flatten the curve, and in doing so, we will help protect our most compromised neighbors. But every now and then, you see some people who are not listening. Now, I do believe this is the minority, but our message is still, please stay at home. Which leads me to my guest today. Last week, I was looking at my Facebook feed and I saw something that she had posted, which we will discuss in a minute. But first, let me introduce you to my guest. She is a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard. She is currently finishing her graduate degree as a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner at DeUva College. She has a bachelor's in workforce education and a bachelor's in nursing from the University of Buffalo. She has worked as a pediatric nurse in the Amherst Central and Buffalo Public School systems. She has also worked inpatient in addictions nursing. She is a longtime member of the Clean Air Coalition of Western New York and was recently hired for the child and adolescent psychiatric nurse practitioner position at Horizon Healthcare. Please welcome Claire Camann. Thank you so much for
Hi.
being here today, Claire.
No, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about your post on Facebook last week. You and
Sure.
your fiance were playing tennis at a local high school. While you were
Yep.
there, a group of teenage girls showed up on their bikes and stopped nearby where you were playing tennis. Keep in mind that we've been mandated by our governor in New York for at least a couple weeks now that there is to be no groups of any size together. So maybe you could finish the story for me.
Yeah, so it's definitely kind of surprising. We're out playing tennis, and there was a little group of teenage girls showed up at the courts, and they were all kind of huddled. You know how like junior high
Girls
kids
will
will
be.
do a
Yeah.
little in a group, yeah, and they're whispering and giggling, and they came over to play paddleball, but it was difficult for them because they were all in groups trying to play pickleball. And being a previous pediatric school nurse and being a nurse now and getting my psych and P, I just, seeing these kids out there doing this kind of risky behavior, especially with the social distancing we're supposed to be doing right now, was kind of disturbing. And I was worried about them and their families because, children aren't as likely to get as sick as adults, but they can still be carriers and pass it on to their families, their grandparents, and whatnot.
Mhm.
So I stopped them and I said, "Excuse me, ladies, how old are you?" And they all kind of, "No, 13 or 13, 13." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Well, you're supposed to be 6 feet away from each other currently, unless you're immediate family." And they just kind of looked at me. No. And I'm used to children giving me the stink eye from years of being a school nurse, so it doesn't faze me at all. And I said, and y'all don't look like immediate family members to me. And they just kind of, So I said, I'm telling you this for your safety. I'm a nurse and I want to make sure that you're safe and your family's safe. And they said, oh, okay, thank you. And then they all got on their bikes and took off. Hopefully they all went home.
And maybe or maybe not, they told their families about that.
I don't care. Yeah. And hopefully their family said, oh, gee, maybe we should keep you home if they did. So,
Well, after I saw that post, I got to thinking about being home. There's not a lot that I feel like I can do, I can contribute to helping people out. And I contacted you because I started thinking about this means of reaching people through the podcast. And if we can get information out there to help people, I think it's really important. You see people in all different types of social media talking about flattening the curve, flattening the curve. And I think that the more it's talked about, the more it becomes a norm and people just begin to do it automatically without even thinking about it. It is hard. It has been hard. It completely, in the beginning they called this a pause, but it doesn't feel like a pause. It feels longer than a
no.
pause. And
Yeah.
so you really have to stop and think about almost everything that you do with your families every step of the way. I went grocery shopping this past weekend and I came home and I had a spot on my table. Half of it was the sanitized area and half of it was not. And I had my bottle of Clorox and water and I sprayed everything down and I had to move everything over. And then my husband would take it from the clean spot and then put it away. And that's just not our norm. and
You're,
it felt very weird.
yeah, it does. It definitely feels weird. And even coming from a medical and here from nursing, where a lot of procedures in nursing are, here's my sterile hand, here's my dirty hand, and we're not going to cross the sterile space and put something dirty in the sterile space or cross contaminate. Even having that experience, it's still very odd to put that in regular life settings.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, and I agree. It is hard to make that transition and think like that constantly, especially when you're out in public. When we've had to go out places where we've had to get things, pharmacies, grocery store, you see people will kind of get a little closer and you back up and they say, oh, I'm sorry, because
Yes.
this isn't our norm. This is our new norm. This isn't what we're
Yes.
used to. And it's a big adjustment.
Yes. And as I would turn the corner to go down a new aisle, I almost evaluated how many people were in that aisle and if I
Is it
wanted to
worth
go
it?
down it. Yeah. Could I get around, maneuver everybody, or should I just go to the next one and come back around if I needed to? So
You're right. Can I
it
skip the mustard
changes.
today?
Yes,
Yeah.
it changes everything that you think about. And even standing
really
in
does.
line waiting to be cashed out, am I far enough away from the person in front of me, and are the people behind me far enough away? So it
Yeah.
is a different thing. But that is sort of all of our norms. I mean, we all have to experience that.
Yeah.
But there is a population of people who have had anxiety and have had depression before this even came into play. And
Right.
now they have that, and then this unknown, and it is a huge unknown as to what's going to happen in the next week and the next 3 weeks and the next couple months. No one knows. And so to have that fear and anxiety and then quadruple it, and not be able to get out, not be able to go to your therapist, your counselor, to your doctor, not to feel as though you have the same support as you did before. It's changed and there is support out there, but it is very different. And so they have to get used to even the new type of support. So what I wanted to talk to you today was really how to help those people, how to help people that even people who have never had anxiety, all of a sudden have anxiety. I mean, I wake up, I have a hard time going to sleep at night, and I can stay up for hours now because nighttime, dark time, is the time when my brain seems to work the fastest and the most and starts thinking about things because I'm laying there. I'm not active. I'm not doing things that can change my thought process. And so I lay down, I'm exhausted, but my brain isn't. My brain's still working. So for everybody, really. I mean, it isn't just the people who have had anxiety and depression before. It is people who are now finding that they have it now, that they never did have it. So I wanted to
You're
kind
right.
of
Yeah.
talk to you about that. Um, what it was interesting. Some of the things that you had talked to me about prior to this was reactions that are normal, and they're very different. So if we could talk a little about that, the
Yeah. The different types of fear reactions.
yeah.
Yeah. And we are seeing our friends and family act very differently.
Mhm.
And sometimes we get upset because we see people panicking and going out and buying hundreds of rolls of toilet paper, while someone else in the family might be just going about their business, acting like everything's fine. Or you might see someone else cleaning obsessively, and they're and it's funny because based on what your fear reaction is, you might view someone else's fear reaction as being very odd and
Yeah.
unusual.
Yep.
But they really all stem from the same process, which is that fight or flight reflex, which we go into in an emergency. And what that happens is that activates your sympathetic nervous system, and it makes you want to either fight or flee, or they even sometimes say freeze.
Hmm.
Um, so a good example of this would be, it's funny because I was going to give this example, and then last night we watched Tiger King. And I
Oh, I've
thought
heard a lot about
this,
that lately.
yeah, and I thought this show is so popular right now. What a like perfect analogy. But so imagine that you're sitting in your room, and all of a sudden a giant 700-pound tiger walks into the room. I mean, your immediate response is going to be thought, oh my gosh, there's a giant tiger in my room. It might eat me, you know? And so what's going to happen after you have this thought is now your limbic system, your emotional system is going to kick in, and your amygdala is going to kick in and say, panic, we need to jump in, trigger that sympathetic nervous system. We need to trigger that fight or flight, and we need to act right now. This is an emergency. This is a threat. And that's what you can see happening with people with the COVID virus. Imagine it's like this giant COVID tiger has walked in, and we don't know what it's going to do. Is it going to eat us? Is it going to sit there? Is it just going to go after grandma? What's it going to do?
Hmm.
And so people's responses are, fighting. They're cleaning. They're getting as much toilet paper. They've locked into the survival mode. There's those who are maybe flight, and another area is maybe denial. This isn't really
Okay.
happening. That's kind of maybe more of a freeze even type response. This isn't happening.
And you
It's
do see
fine.
that.
Everything's fine.
And I
Yeah.
got to say that I think that you see all of those things, either with family and friends around you, or really on Facebook. You see a lot of
Yeah.
things in the news. You
Right.
even see, and I don't know if this is the same thing, but you do see a lot of people in positions of power responding in different ways.
Yes. And that's their own sympathetic nervous system, their own fear. And what you're seeing is the reaction to that fear. And what's happening is, with as this occurs, and it keeps occurring because we there's so many unknowns, right? We have all
Yeah.
this anxiety because we don't know if we're going to get sick. We don't know if your family's going to be safe. You don't know if you'll keep your job. We don't know how long we have to stay away from our friends, and worst of all, we don't know when these children are going back to school. I
Yeah.
mean, there's all these unknowns. And what happens is, it's like the tiger's never leaving the room.
Okay.
So when you're constantly fearful because you have all these unknowns, you don't know if that tiger's going to attack. You don't know if you're going to be safe. Now, what happens is, when you're in that constant state of a sympathetic nervous system. Now, I also need to mention, we are supposed to be in parasympathetic nervous system state of rest most of the time. Our bodies aren't made to react to acute stress for extended periods of time. Our
Okay.
ancestors, if they came across a wild animal in the forest, it wouldn't just hang out with them for the next few weeks.
Right.
It would go away.
Hmm.
So your body's supposed to go back into rest and digest quickly after it activates the sympathetic fight or flight.
So
And what
is there a
happens is,
way?
imagine, yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So when that tiger comes in that room, your cortisol levels are going up, you're stressed, you're anxious. And the way to bring that back down is to retrain your thoughts. And I'm going to ask people who are listening right now, if they can, to just first of all, just grab a pen and paper.
Okay.
And make a list of the things that they can control versus the things they can't, because it's these can't controls that really, it's that tiger in the room that sets us off.
So I can make my list in the middle of the night on that side.
You certainly can.
Yeah.
And that might be helpful, because if you're sitting there anyway,
right,
because it's that can't side that's really got you upset.
Yeah, it
and
creeps
like you
in.
said, yes, and it's very common at night for people when they have a lot of anxiety for it to creep in at night, because that is a time when your mind isn't focusing on anything else. And now it can explore these scary thoughts that it's been pushing off all day long.
Yep.
So an analogy we use with kids a lot is, imagine after you make this list that the can't control is a rock, and you put the rock in one hand. And what you can control is Play-Doh, and you put the Play-Doh in the other. And you could squeeze that rock all you want, that can't control, but it's not going to change that rock's shape. It's going to stay hard and firm. So all these fears, am I going to lose my job? Are we going to get sick? What's going to happen? You can just continue squeezing it, but it's not going to change anything. These are still going to exist. Versus if you focusing on what you can control, I can do some work from home. I can spend time with my children and develop a better relationship with them. I can bring food to the hospitals. I can make masks, all these things I can control. This feels a lot better, right? These things that we have power over. And so what I like to say with anxiety is anxiety is fear of losing control. And if we take back that control, suddenly this tiger in the room isn't so scary. This tiger in the room, suddenly it becomes a cub. It becomes a tiger cub. And for all those who have seen Tiger King, when you see the people in there, in the trainers with the giant tigers, you're scared. I mean, just watching the show, you get scared. But then when you see them take out a little tiger cub and they're cuddling, oh, it's so cute. Suddenly everything, you calm down and you feel better. And when we feel like we have control of the situation, suddenly the things that we don't have control of don't seem so scary.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. I think that's why some people will start cleaning and purging and things like that, because they have control. And in that feeling, when you've completed that task, is such a feeling of accomplishment, and that helps you. Now, how, it sounds really easy to sit down with a pen and paper and make your list of your good things and the things you have control over and the things that you don't. But how, in that night when everything is dark and those things start to creep back in, how do you keep that balance?
When it comes to sleep, there's a lot of different things you can do, and different things work for different people. Some people, and which I find also helpful for myself, is before going to bed, not watching news or reading things that are going to excite me or get me upset. Trying to get myself in that frame of mind of comfortable, calm, relaxed, whatever that means for you or whoever is listening to this. So if it's reading a book, if that's journaling, if that's snuggling with your child and talking to them, those things can set the tone for when you go to bed, so your mind isn't already racing when you lay down.
Okay.
And then once you are in bed, let me back up a little bit. Exercise is really good for sleep.
Okay.
If you start exercising daily, do a cardio, even 3 to 5 times a week, you'll sleep so much better, because when you lay down, your body's tired. It's physically tired.
So take a good walk, or
any kind of cardio, if you can get in 30 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be strenuous. I mean, we have enough going on right now. You don't need to start a whole new exercise regimen. Just any kind of exercise. I mean, they say exercise is, if you could make one miracle pill that would treat every mental health and physical disease in the world, it would be exercise. Because of the endorphins you release. If you go outside, just going outside, you release endorphins.
Right.
If you exercise with friends or with family member, social aspect, but it really is good for helping you sleep at night. So exercising helps you sleep. Before you go to bed, getting yourself in that state of mind to where you're calm. And I really think meditation is helpful. And I know a lot of
Okay.
people struggle with that,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of apps you can do on your phone before you go to bed. The Calm app is one of them.
Okay.
There's also free YouTube meditative videos where you just put your headphones on or turn your phone on and listen to it and just follow along. And it actually makes it a lot easier. Starting out, meditate maybe 5 minutes at most.
Uh-huh.
It takes time to learn, but it also calms you down. It takes you out of that, like we talked before, out of that sympathetic into the parasympathetic rest and digest state
And you might
before
have
you sleep.
to find a corner of your house if you have people in your home and you're not alone, to find that quiet time. Because what
Most
we've all
certainly.
learned, I think, is that everybody seems to have their space right now. Everybody
Yes.
has called a room or a table
Mm,
or something as their own, and
mm,
that's where they are doing their work or, school or work. Um,
yeah.
and as a family, we've all had to sort of redefine what our norm is for our family because you're not usually with your spouse 24/7
Right.
unless you're retired.
No, no, you're not. And it's funny because since you mentioned that,
Yeah.
doing telehealth right now with one of my preceptors, and we hear a lot of a lot of people complaining about spouses and children being around all the time
Yes.
and needing that
Yes.
break. So it is very important that you take time for yourself. I think especially as women constantly want to be taking care of their families. It's just part of our biology. Women are programmed to be caregivers. We want to take care of others, and
Right.
when your family's with you 24/7, that can become very draining very fast.
Yeah, it can. Because the
Hmm.
situation is not a calm situation anyways, I mean, just
Hmm.
with what's going on in the world. So you bring that on top of everybody in your home never going out. I think it's a good idea to check in on everybody. I know, like for my own kids, I will just pop in on them and say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What's going on in your life? Just so that they have somebody to just talk to. You kind of get wrapped up in your day working or making meals. It feels like that's all
Hmm.
I do right now is make meals. Like we
Hmm.
go from one meal to the other.
All this
And
cooking,
yeah,
I know.
that's all I do. And so just to take time out and check in with each one of them just to say, how are you
Yeah,
doing?
and and it's good that you're doing that. I noticed a difference with older kids. So the older children are more likely to distance themselves from their families and go
Mhm.
into their rooms.
Yeah.
And depending on the personality of your child, they also might clam up. So they
Hmm.
may not be telling you how they feel and
Right.
that they're upset. So it for those children, it is very important to go and talk to them and ask them, question them. How is all this going for you? How are you feeling? What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? And then for younger children are much more likely to be clingy um, when they're feeling anxious. So
Hmm.
they're more likely to not be distancing themselves. They're more likely to want to be with you because they're scared.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I noticed
so
one of my children, they will every once in a while they'll just come over and just hover. And
hmm
not really for any particular reason, but they'll just
hmm
hover. And when I'm
yeah,
working and I notice that, I stop what I'm doing because I think
yeah,
there's something, whatever it is, whatever they want to, or they just want to connect. And I think
hmm
sometimes that's all it is. They just want human
hmm
contact
yes,
because
yes,
they're not having that as much as
yes,
they were. Like 6 hours a day in school was a lot of
hmm
contact. And when they came home, they didn't want my contact. But now it's reversed and now they're
now they don't
looking
have the
for it.
choice. They have to
Yeah.
have right. They
And they
need
and
you
they're
now
looking
because they don't have
for
anybody
it.
else to talk to.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And I think we are seeing a lot of families become closer because of
Yeah,
that too.
I do believe,
Because
yeah.
now you only have your family to rely
Yes,
on and
yes.
lean on.
And it's
Yeah,
a great
I agree.
opportunity as a family to try to connect, have those dinners, those times
Hmm.
with dinners. And we even last week played a card game, which we never do. But we all sat down and we all played, which I just think is a good thing to do. So I think there's a lot of positive to all of this.
Yeah,
And
there really are.
sometimes you have to really look for it and you have to
Yeah,
appreciate it. Now, you
and
were
I'm seeing.
talking, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm seeing a lot of people outside now too, and
Well, the
it's nice to
weather's
see
getting a
families
lot
outside
nicer.
together. And it's
Yes.
nice because prior to this, our neighborhood, gorgeous neighborhood, lots of trees, and you'd hardly ever see anybody outside.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing so many people outside, and I'm hoping that once this all passes, that people continue to spend time outdoors with their families and doing outdoor activities.
Yeah, I hope that it was sort of a kick in the butt, maybe in a way, but it did change the dynamic of families now. And I think
Mhm.
that I hope that out of all of this comes a deeper appreciation for the people around you.
Yeah,
And if we get
me
that,
too.
then maybe
Mhm.
it was at least a little bit worth it. You were talking about like a mantra. That
Yes.
what what can you say about a mantra, and how is that helpful?
Okay. So I won't go too far into this because it takes a while to learn. I'm going to cover briefly. In psychology, when we have these negative thoughts that are constantly invading our brain, we oftentimes just accept them as truth, right? Like you ever heard of Jiminy Cricket? Always let
Mhm.
your conscience be your guide. So we get used to that voice in our brain steering us to what we should do and what we should think, that it's always trying to help us. But the reality is, in these kinds of situations, when we're having a lot of anxiety and fear, that little voice inside our head isn't always telling us what we should be hearing and what we should be doing, especially when it's being controlled by fear. So, in psychiatry and psychology, we often utilize cognitive behavioral therapy, which is recognizing your thoughts, connecting them to the emotions that you have, realizing the connection, and then um, changing those thoughts so that you don't feel those such negative emotions. For instance, imagine you're sitting there doing homework with your son, and you're helping him do his homework because we're all home now helping our children out with their schoolwork, and
Yeah.
then you sneeze. Okay. Now, before COVID, you'd probably just think, oh, seasonal allergies, and that probably is what it is.
Yeah.
But right now, in this heightened state of anxiety and fear, you might think, oh my gosh, I just sneezed, and oh my gosh, I might have corona and I might die. And what
Mhm.
that's going to do is also that thought of I sneezed and I'm going to die is going to trigger you to jump into that sympathetic state of anxiety, trigger that cortisol, and it's going to put you in back in that state of panic again. Whereas if you had just thought I sneezed, I must have allergies, it's not going to trigger that thought's not going to trigger that emotional part of the brain to jump into a state of panic. So what I like to do when anxiety's high, what I like to teach my patients is when they're having these kinds of thoughts, to to examine the thought and think, is this true?
Mhm.
I mean, you and I say this out loud, if you sneeze, you're going to get COVID and die. It sounds silly and
Yeah,
it sounds
right.
funny, right? But
Yep.
when you're having that thought, it feels very real.
Yes.
So if you have a thought and you can catch yourself having this thought, if you can write it down or say it out loud,
Uh-huh.
you can catch yourself jumping to these conclusions that are scaring you. And if you can replace that with a mantra, it can bring your nervous system down and calm it down to where you're not going into this state of panic all the time. And so I like just to use an easy one that you can go to, and people can make up their own. I'm going to give you an example of one
Okay.
that if anyone wants to write it down, they can, to use themselves. And you can use it multiple times a day, anytime you're upset or scared. And the one I like to use is I'm scared because I don't know what the outcome is going to be. But in the meantime, I can continue working on what I do have power over. And what this does is it acknowledges that you're scared. If you try to convince your brain that it's not scared and everything's fine,
Yeah.
it's not going to buy it.
Mhm.
Our emotional limbic system and our brains are very smart. It knows if we're going to try to outsmart it. You're not going to trick that little Jiminy the Cricket. But if you acknowledge the fear and say, I'm scared because I don't know what the outcome is going to be, and that is true.
Okay.
That's not saying I'm scared because I'm going to die. We don't know that. It's not saying I'm scared because I'm going to lose my house because I lost my job. You don't know that either.
Mhm.
I'm scared because I don't know the outcome. That's true.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I can continue working on what I do have control and power over, kind of the Play-Doh rock analogy we were talking about before.
Now I wonder, is it a good idea to say those mantras even when you're not in an anxiety state, so that it becomes more of a normal So if you said 3 times a day, no matter, every 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and before you go to bed, you're going to say this to yourself, whether you're feeling anxiety or not, that it becomes a better, truthful thought.
I think if you feel that you're having a high state of anxiety currently all the time, whether you previously had anxiety, depression, or psychiatric disorder, or if you're just having it now, it's okay to say that several times to memorize it, but I wouldn't say it over and over all the time when you don't feel, because you're acknowledging that you're scared. If you're not feeling scared all the time, you don't want to say, I'm scared.
Okay, that's good.
You don't want to tell yourself you're scared.
Yeah.
This is more a mantra to use when you're having these thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
Because what happens a lot of times, and you'd kind of mentioned this earlier, that that obsessive compulsiveness of the thoughts and the cleaning and the things like that, it's because people are having these thoughts over and over again.
Okay.
And if we can stop it from, let's go back to our tiger analogy. Tiger walks in the room. The thought is, there's a tiger in the room, I'm going to die, versus a tiger cub walking into the room. Tiger cub could still be scary, but it's not quite as scary as that big, giant tiger.
Right.
So acknowledging, I'm scared, I don't know what's going to happen here, but in the meantime, I can do things to help myself and help the situation. And now that doesn't trigger that fight or flight response. That doesn't trigger that cortisol release, which, as you know, it can exacerbate anxiety, depression, and many chronic health disorders, hypertension, diabetes, those types of things, being in that constant state of fight or flight and high cortisol levels.
So along with the mantra, you suggested sleep, good night of sleep, diet, which I got to tell you, diet could be a toughie right now.
A lot of people are complaining about that. I hear a lot of people on Facebook and stuff saying, I'm getting fat, I'm going to be so fat because
there's not much else to do than eat. But
all I can do is eat.
But then exercise. So if you're going to eat that bag of chips, then go out and take a walk afterwards.
Hey, I think what we're finding now, and what we've always known, is that there's 3 big factors in our physical and mental health that we can all probably do better at, and that's sleep, exercise, and diet.
Yeah.
And that being said, this isn't the time to suddenly make a total life transformation.
Sure.
As it is, we're trying to adjust to this new norm. We're trying to take care of our kids that are home all the time. Some of us are still going into work, the healthcare workers and stuff are on the front lines with this.
Yeah.
I would say pick the one that you're struggling with the most and make one small change.
Okay.
So if you're having a hard time with sleep before bed, do what makes you feel comfortable and gets you into that calm state, whether that be a bath or reading or something. If you're struggling with your diet, if you're struggling because you're eating a lot more junk food now, make one small change. Have a salad with your meals at night. And even just adding a salad, you won't be as hungry later to dive into that junk food. Don't try to change your whole diet plan. Just do one small thing. And those things over time will slowly add up. So you can make one small change this week, maybe one small change next week.
Yeah.
But, we really have to give ourselves some grace here, because this is a tough time. And if we stray a little bit off the path and have some cookies or brownies, or maybe don't go exercise one day, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. I saw somebody today say they wanted to give somebody some advice. Don't wear leggings, don't wear sweatpants, wear your jeans, because if you can still button them, you're still in good shape. so I don't know. But that actually,
I'm in my pajama pants right now. I'm telling you. I don't really much not mantra. Rudy got a video conference up here. It's all professional, but down low, I'm still hanging out comfortable. So I guess whatever works for you. I mean, if that's like what keeps you, I think I like to always do things with positive reinforcement. I'm going to do something that's good for me because I enjoy it.
Sure.
Like, I'm going to eat this salad because I actually like the salad that I made too. I'm not going to force myself to eat something I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a really good salad, or I'm going to exercise. And guess what? I'm going to go do what I like to do, which is ride my bike. I'm not going to go do 50 push-ups. I hate push-ups.
Yeah.
Right. So if what you're doing is healthy and it's something you enjoy, it's going to be a lot easier versus punishing yourself. Like, these pants don't fit, and that might work for some people, maybe some, but I think when we use a positive reinforcement, it's much more likely to have lasting effects.
Right, right. So for the people who are still struggling after, trying to get better sleep, trying to be better at dieting, getting a little bit more of exercise, but still have this problem with anxiety, they can't kind of get out of that fight or flight mode.
Hmm. Hmm.
What other help can they get?
Well, we're really fortunate that this did occur during a time where we have such great technological resources,
Yeah.
and so many avenues of communication. Um, if you are feeling that you need some help and you've never asked for help before, I just have to tell you that it takes a lot of strength to say, I need help.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable isn't being weak. It actually shows a lot of courage to be vulnerable and say, I need some help right now, and reach out.
And I think it's a
Um,
really big way of taking control.
oh, yes, definitely. Absolutely. Good point. Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. It definitely is to say, hey, my brain's kind of going off on the deep end over here, and I feel like an emotional wreck right now. Yeah, absolutely. Taking control of that and grabbing the reins and asking for help and getting help with that
So
is a way of taking
where
back your
can somebody
power.
go? Who can they
So,
contact?
you can contact Horizon Health Services. That's who I work for. They're a great organization. They help individuals and families with mental health disorders and substance use disorders. Um, they are very person centered. They do medical, psychiatric counseling services. Um,
And
they have
how are they doing that now with
Well, now they're doing it through primarily telehealth. They're still
okay.
open. There's still physical locations you can go in, but a lot of patients are now going through telehealth,
Okay.
and we're finding that, and they can also use the phone. They don't have to. We're finding that people at first time doing telehealth are a little anxious,
Hmm.
but that I've been doing because I'm doing precepting too still for school. But it quickly becomes okay. This is what I'm doing now, and like I said, phone calls are more comfortable for some people because they don't feel like they're being videoed or stared at, and
Okay.
I think that's a good option too. So Horizon's a good place. I'll give you their number for admissions. It's 831-1800, or you can go to their website at horizon-health.org.
Okay.
Also, Western New York Mental Health Advocates is a great organization that you can reach out for information on counseling services, health services. And I'm also going to give you some numbers for crisis hotlines
Okay.
for anyone who might be feeling, any kind of suicidal ideations or injury, and they want help and need help right now.
Okay. And we'll
So,
post those as well.
yeah.
Well, I really thank you for your time today. I
Yeah.
think that if we can just reach one person and they listen to this and it makes them feel a little bit more like everybody else, because I think
Hmm.
there's a lot more people feeling what they're feeling. And if we can make them
Absolutely.
feel a little bit safer, give them some ideas to try at home, and if they need some more help, then don't be afraid to pick up the phone and try and call. That is having control over your own life and your own
Hmm.
decisions, and you'll feel much stronger by doing that. So we encourage
Absolutely.
everybody to do that. Thank you so much
Hmm.
again for your time. I really
Oh, yeah.
appreciate it.
Oh,
And
you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
yeah, and stay safe, stay healthy,
Thanks. You too.
and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, Karen.
Bye.